Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Obviously, I'm going to just share my thoughts about everything we saw in the movie. Do you know, I have not seen the theatrical version in like, what, 2-3 years? So I remember some of the things from the theatrical version that ended up being in this one just because, like, I guess these are stuff, the things that were similar between the movies are the things from Zack's original plan that they ended up still using for the theatrical. So obviously what's interesting though, is obviously like there's a lot of new stuff, but there's stuff we've seen previously, but now we get more context and kind of understanding of like some of the stuff that was cut around, or maybe stuff that he, you know, was originally there with his original plan that maybe he added at certain points later, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to do a little comparing and contrasting, but not too much, because like I said, I don't remember too much. Obviously this movie does, I think, a fantastic job of just standing on its own, of like, even if you've seen the theatrical version, like there are some similarities, but at the same time it goes in completely different directions in a lot of cases. But nevertheless, just kind of breaking some stuff down, even like the Amazonian thing at the beginning, I don't remember if it all played out. Like when Diana's mom ends up like, basically, it's like, oh, having to seal that place and it crumbles to the ground, and sadly Steppenwolf and a lot of the parademons ended up escaping anyway. I don't remember that playing out like that. It might have, like I said, I just don't remember. Obviously it's also a lot more like, I mean, like I said, I feel like do correct me if I'm wrong. Like I said, I don't remember if that was in the original, I mean the theatrical version of the movie or not, that whole, at least that part of the sequence. I remember Steppenwolf fighting the Amazonians, and I feel like some of those sequences were the same, but I don't remember about sealing that facility. It might have been in the original. Like I said, I just don't remember. I was like, oh, whether it was or not, it's still just kind of a sad thing of like, yeah, you sacrificing all those people because saving the mother boxes, stopping Steppenwolf from getting the mother box is that important. But to be fair, it's also at the same time, it was almost like, damn, it wasn't even worth it because the parademons and Steppenwolf just came right back. So it, you know, but also it's like that one Amazonian in particular was like, honor us by sealing this place because, you know, we're going to potentially die. And it's like to make sure that the world doesn't get destroyed by these boxes, the mother boxes kind of uniting. I think they probably went into a lot more about the mother boxes this movie too. Once again, that's kind of the problem of not remembering how much was in the original, but still, obviously I know the original like war, and it was kind of neat that like the backstory, you know, it being Diana that kind of gives it, obviously, like that whole arrow, like the Artemis arrow or whatever, flying to like Diana to let her know like, oh, like what's going on, kind of led her to like that temple, finding out about the mother box's dark side, which is also interesting to know that he's been around so long, because that was 5,000 years ago when he originally came to Earth, like, you know, and the mother box's thing, because he was trying to find the anti-life equation, the anti-life equation, and it was here on Earth, and it's the ultimate weapon in the universe, I guess, of just like wiping everything out and getting it under his control. It was also interesting too, because I don't think they ever explained this about the parademons, but basically I guess the parademons are all the people he's basically captured, because the whole point is like, with this he can basically, people will be alive but they're almost like zombies. They're just no longer, they're alive but just no souls essentially. So I was like, and it's like those were, and then Diana was explaining those were parademons. So I was like, oh, so like parademons are pretty much every place he's ever conquered and stole people's lives essentially. So they're kind of basically his zombie soldiers. So I was like, I would like, when I heard that, like I said, I'm butchering it a little bit, but I was like, oh, that's so fascinating to know that like every parademon is just another victim of dark sides. Interestingly enough, I just thought that was so fascinating. Like, it was just like a little bit of the dialogue that I'm like, they never really circled back to, but I was like, oh, that's such an interesting thing, because I never knew that about them. Obviously I've seen them pop up in some DC stuff from here and there, but it's like, anything I've ever come across them, it's just like, oh, it's dark side parademons, and just leave it at that. To kind of give them a backstory like that was really interesting. Obviously seeing everyone, you know, obviously the gods, the world of men, the Amazonians, and the Atlanteans all working kind of together in that regard. And I liked how Diana was kind of breaking that down, like obviously before Atlantis became like the secret that it was, underneath, before it sank into the sea, before the Amazonians were betrayed and kind of locked away with the mascara, like, you know, this group of people who knew they shouldn't really trust and fight alongside each other, fought alongside each other, was also interesting too, because we saw at least one Green Lantern. I guess that was a particular lantern that was kind of roaming, like, because I mean, obviously Green Lanterns are like space cops, so I guess that was that Green Lantern that was stationed on this side of the universe. Sadly, he ended up dying. Luckily, I wonder, is it you always think about stuff like that. I wonder, is that the ring that will eventually come back to Earth? Like, I don't know the Green Lantern's whole situation, so that ring could have gone to any other lantern, but who knows? Like, that was 5,000 years ago. I think it'd be neat if that particular ring came back to Earth. Well, because usually I think because they cover the entire universe, the whole galaxy. So I'm wondering, like, because we know Hal and John and Kyle are Green Lanterns from Earth. So like, if you're the lantern of that particular planet, like, you tend to stay in that section, right? But I think the lanterns don't just allocate to their planet. I think they look over the entire universe. Because I was wondering, like, he's not an Earth Green Lantern, but it's still, that's his kind of territory. Maybe he was just the one that was sent out at the time. I don't know. I'm overthinking things, but I just think it'd be interesting if that came full circle, and it was like that particular ring kind of came back to Earth, and whichever lantern they decide to go with, whether it's John, Kyle, or John, ended up getting that particular ring. I think that'd be kind of interesting for that to kind of come full circle in that regard. I also thought it was pretty dope that, like, oh, Darkseid got jacked up. I wouldn't have, because Darkseid's the badass that he is. It was like, oh, so to see him get messed up like that also showed you how, like, tough. I mean, you had, like, basically a whole bunch of different armies, a whole mass of different armies coming together, like Zeus and Ares, and obviously the Lanterns and the World of Man, of the Amazonians, but they're all being able to work together, messing Darkseid up like that to the point he had to retreat. I thought was, like, kind of interesting, because you wouldn't take Darkseid as the one to kind of get punked out like that. That was kind of interesting to me to see him that wounded. I thought everyone was going to get, like, their shit pushed in, essentially. I am kind of bummed we only get to see it once in the movie, because obviously it's also in the trailers. It's the Omega laser, like, this thing. I'm like, oh, dude, it's sick that you get to see, like, especially just, like, obviously the crazy weird direction. Like, you see it in one scene. It's like when there's that potential future of him, like ruling everything, and he ends up killing Aquaman, and then, like, someone was behind him and he was using his Omega vision, like his Omega laser eyes or whatever, to kill someone behind him. I was like, oh, that's so dope. Because we just didn't see him get to use it in that fight. We just saw him kind of using his raw superhuman strength. Oh yeah, since we're on the subject of Darkseid, I should also point out, I thought was really interesting. I'm pretty sure this wasn't in the theatrical version either. Was like Steppenwolf's backstory of, like, him being on Earth was because he screwed up bad. Like I said, maybe it was. I didn't remember. Like, I jumped on that being like, whoa, I don't remember that. Once again, my problem for not having seen the movie in like 2 years ago. I thought it was interesting, the whole Steppenwolf thing of, like, oh yeah, like, he screwed up so badly that, like, he can't come home. It's like, he's like, oh, can we talk to Lord Darkseid about me coming home after I claim this planet for him? It's like, oh no, you still owe Darkseid 50,000 planets. And after that, then we'll talk about you coming home. I was like, oh, you're the banished loser of that world. And it's like, Dad's not going to welcome you home with open arms until you get the job done. You know, which is kind of interesting to think about. I was like, wow. Which I think that also speaks volumes that, like, Steppenwolf's kind of the runt of Darkseid's people. So for, like, for Earth to kind of struggle as much as they did against him, I think that's just that kind of the interesting thing of, like, oh yeah, like, if he's this tough for you guys to handle, it's like Darkseid's going to be a whole other level. I mean, to be fair, once again, it took, like, large armies from all different fronts to come together to take him down. So it's not, you know, it's like when it's just like 5 to 6 people, like, it's understandable, like, that probably wouldn't be the easiest thing. Like, obviously we know, like, Darkseid in many different continuities as wrecked even Superman, so that's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. I just thought that was an interesting backstory for Steppenwolf. And since I was also circling back to the Amazonians really quickly, I think this was kind of an interesting story, because obviously, like, Diana's been living in the world of man for a very, very, very long time at this point in time. So it was really interesting, like, obviously, like, having Steppenwolf taunt her by being like, oh, like, if you were home, you could have helped defend it, but you were here, and obviously making her probably, like, regret her decision a little bit. Like, obviously, you know, we see at the end, like, she's, that Artemis era, like, she's looking at it thinking of home, you know? And like I said, I don't know if they've I haven't seen the original Wonder Woman in a while, so I don't know if they explain, like, once you leave Themyscira, there's never any going back. I don't know if that's something whether it's like Themyscira becomes invisible to you, so it's because you like, finding the island is impossible. So that's, I think, another angle to it, because, like, even if Diana wanted to go back, it's like she probably can't find her way back. Maybe eventually she will, maybe that'll kind of pop up in the Wonder Woman movies, but I think that's the reasoning why she never goes back, because she actually can't, because you can't find the island. It's meant to be hidden away. Like, So finding it again, you know, so it's just kind of that thing of like, yeah, I may never be able to see my family again. Also not not believing Steppenwolf, but there's still a part of you that's like, I don't know if my mom's actually okay or not, you know, so she doesn't know all the ins and outs of what's going on at Themyscira, so of course you're going to have your worries and concerns, you know. So obviously, me being the fanboy that I am, it should come as no surprise that some of my favorite aspects of this were the Flash things, because once again, I've talked about it, I've always liked the Flash, but like because of the TV show, I've grown to love the Flash as a character. And so I thought it was interesting how they handled the Flash in this movie. Obviously, we got like our Barry and Iris scene of like him like getting a dog walking job, and I know some people didn't like how he was represented. Probably I've heard some opinions about how he was in this movie and as well as the theatrical movie, but I like him just being kind of like the awkward mess that he is. So just kind of like, oh yeah, trying to like, you know, it's just he gets very like, he starts talking really a lot when he gets nervous, but obviously he's trying to get this job, but it was actually a sad reason why he's trying to get the job. Like he's getting all these different jobs because he's trying to pay for his way through college so that basically he can study under like criminal justice so that he can, you know, obviously everything he does is working towards getting his dad out of prison. So working all these different jobs, I thought that was such an interesting, obviously it adds, you know, more obviously background to like his situation, kind of understanding his circumstances more, but also having his dad be like, I don't want to be the reason you hold your life back, like go out there and live your life, don't be stuck on the past, and just kind of move forward, find your way forward, make your own future essentially. Don't let me be the thing that, you know, because he doesn't want Barry spending the rest of his life like, because that's always been Barry's end goal, is finding a way to get it. Because it's like, yeah, you went to prison for something you didn't do. Like, let me help you. But his dad doesn't want him to waste it. It's like, you know, go out there, like, just live your life. Find something that's, don't get these dead-end jobs just so you can support yourself to college, just to help me. Don't let me be, like, the reason why your life is stuck on hold, you know? And I thought that was a very impactful side of things. Also, interestingly enough, well, really quickly, back to that whole Iris thing I thought was pretty dope, was, like, obviously like how obviously like he needs to wear specific clothes so he doesn't burn through everything, because even his sneakers, like when he kind of goes to save Iris and like his shoes literally rip apart. And I love the whole thing of like how it looked when he's poking the glass and the glass like warps before it breaks. I was like, you know, come on, cinematically that looks sick. And just also like him taking his time and just like, once again, like the world from the view of a speedster is, to me, that's just one of the coolest things that you can do so much with. And in that moment, like Iris is falling and he's just kind of like pushing her hair out of the way a little bit. And he also picks up the hot dog. I'm like, what the hell? At first I was like, are you going to make a hot dog when you're supposed to be saving her? But he's using that for something else. I like how that kind of ties in, but he ends up saving Iris. And in that moment, she's looking at him, he's like, shit, and he dashes away. So we never get any more with that. But I love that he's over there with the dogs. He's like, oh man, that's crazy what happened outside. Oh man, I hope everyone's okay. He's like, oh, but look at this. I always come ready with a dog treat. So I start now? Yeah? So I was like, I loved it. Once again, I love that aspect. But also like, I think in the theatrical version, they made it so that Bruce is the one who made his suit. But in this one, it was actually Barry who made it, I think. It's what they were kind of insinuating. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't remember if they covered that either, about the whole like he needs a whole bunch of calories and stuff like that. I remember the whole like, oh, my superpower being rich thing. I think I remember that from the theatrical, but I don't remember if they went into the ins and outs about maybe the Speed Force. I wonder if they're going to make that I would assume just because it's a sentient thing like in other iterations. So I would assume, because he's just like, oh, I'm gonna call it the Speed Force. So it's like, it's not this sentient thing, at least yet. Maybe they'll deal with that in the Flash movie, but yeah, like I still liked a lot of like, especially like when they're saving everyone later, when they're like saving all the people, Steppenwolf and the parademons end up kidnapping, like him running up and down the stairs. He's like, come on guys, come on, and like he just keeps like dashing up and down the stairs. I love that. But honestly, like where his story ends up at the very end, like, you know, he's hurt, he's like a speed healing. And I was like, oh, so that's like the only time they really touch on that, because he had gotten hurt earlier in the movie and they never really covered that, but I guess later on they do, because to anyone that doesn't know, the Flash has super fast healing just because of the way his body is with the speed and everything. Like he can heal fast as well. But I love that moment of just like what that ends up being. I'm going to be jumping all over the storyline just because of all the different storylines, but I love that angle to like, nah, they failed, but in that moment, like Barry's like, all right, because he knows ahead of time, he's like, if I move too fast, like time starts getting a little wonky. So when they were about to bring that Superman, he had brought that up, like, all right, if I go super fast, I can supercharge the cube and the mother box and everything, but And I also like time gets a little wonky when I do that. And obviously he's like, all right, I'm gonna have to break my rule, because I guess he had already established like, yeah, do not do that. Which is ironic and interesting, because obviously because of Flashpoint, he breaks that rule. It makes me wonder, is it because of this moment that makes him think like, wait, like does he, because I think it might be a situation where it starts crossing his mind going forward at that point. Once again, it depends on how they decide to handle the Flash movie with that. But it could be this if they kind of continue along with this continuity, this could be what jump-started him to be like, I could go back in time, I could fix everything, I don't have to worry, I could do it this way, I can save my mom, I can also make sure I have a life with my dad. So that could be like, this could be the beginning steps, but him doing that, like him just running and like listening to what his dad said of kind of forging his own past, his own future. And in that moment, as he's running, everything's getting rebuilt around him as it was destroyed, and he rewinds time, and then he like the built up energy, he passes it on to Victor. And I was like, that's so sick too, because that was something they didn't tackle at all. Like obviously, you know, the Flash is so fast, he can go back in time, and it's so interesting to see that. But like I said, these are just like the baby steps to it. But like I said, also like how they manifested it, how it looked in the movie. I'm curious, like how is it going to look different going forward? Like when he is like running back in time, like are they going to do something similar to that, where you're seeing everything kind of get like things like that were built kind of getting like back to its foundation, up and down? Like is that how they're going to show it, or is it just going to be like one giant boom? Like maybe in this particular case it's because he's moving back seconds, not like hours, or in later case because of Flashpoint, years. So I wonder just how they're going to like depict that, like live action wise. I'm just curious, just because of the way they manifested it in this movie. I thought was just pretty dope. Like I said, it's just showing you he's pushing himself to rewind seconds at a time. It's not like I said, hours. So who knows, maybe this is as far, at least that's what he could control at this point in time. Maybe later on it becomes a thing of, oh, he couldn't control it, so he ends up going like full blast back years. Like I said, it depends on how they ultimately decide to handle it. So I just thought that was pretty dope. I also love the conversation between him and Vic, where it's like, oh, it's a Wonder Woman, huh? You think she'd be into a younger guy? She's 5,000 years old, Barry. Everyone's a younger guy to her, you know? And speaking of Victor, I thought it was really nice, obviously, that being the biggest thing of like, that was kind of removed from the original movie. It was a lot of stuff with Victor, kind of understanding like, you know, the complicated relationship he already had with his dad, just because he already felt like his dad wasn't there. The only person that's like, yeah, mom, you're busy all the time, but at least you make time. Like, what's dad's excuse? And for him to lose his mom like that, it's like, because his mom represented that middle ground. Like, obviously there was a lot of tension between Victor and his dad. Like, there was already a little bit of resentment, but especially after everything his dad did, now like with his mom there to kind of balance things out, you know? I mean, it's understandable why, you know, Victor would feel the way he did, because it's like, you made me into a monster. Like, who I am is Victor Stone is gone. I'm cyborg now. Like, how can I be a part of this world looking the way I did? Like, so he's always going to hold resentment against his dad. But there's also the thing of Silas, you know, didn't have much choice. He literally just lost his wife. He was told that Victor was going to die. It's like, I have to save someone. If I can't save anyone, I have to save my son. I thought it was interesting because I think they specifically went with the storyline in Doom Patrol that he had a choice on who to save. And this one, by the time he gets there, like, or at least maybe she died on impact, maybe she died at the hospital, but by the time he gets there, he doesn't have time. Like, his wife had already died, so only person he could save was Vic. So I thought that was interesting. Like I said, that was just a Doom. I don't know if that's typically how Cyborg's story works in the comic books, whether that's like just a Doom Patrol thing of going with that storyline, or is that typically how it works? Like maybe he had a choice, you know. But it's understandable like why Vic would kind of resent him, but it's also like, yeah, you're his son, so he wanted to do whatever he could to save you. Granted, he experimented on you by using alien technology, but that also shows how far a father is going to, you know, save his son. And I figured, you know, it was sad too, because like Cyborg, like Vic listens to like the recording of like what he's capable of doing, and I like that of like, basically you have access, you can be one of the most powerful beings on this planet, like you can control all the nuclear warheads, you can control this, you could do that, but what's going to make you a hero, what's going to distinguish you from, you know, anyone else and show what kind of a person you are is by not doing it. That having all this power at the tip of your fingertips, but not using it and abusing it. In fact, actually using it, like he found, like he was following this one particular lady's life and that she was struggling, and he put a little bit more money in her bank account and rose her up to like 100,000, like help her out. And I was like, that was pretty nice, kind of showing, like, you know, showing the, you know, what kind of person he is, even with access to all that he is, like that he didn't go overboard, that he didn't do anything corrupt, that he did, you know, something small like that to help somebody. I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But also, regardless, it also shows that even though he feels the way he does, because initially he destroys the recording before his dad gets to the, now that was me talking as a scientist, let me speak to you as your father. He destroys the recording. But the fact is, he's willing to save his father later on. It's like, yeah, no matter, he's like, I didn't think you'd show up. It's like, of course I would. You're my dad. Like, but I think that's also the sad thing is that Vic never had that opportunity. It's like already bad enough losing your mom, but on top of that, you lost your dad. You never had a time to really fully make amends for things. Like, tell him how you really felt. Like, let him know, like, you know, I love, like, there's so many regrets. It's not just him. Like, obviously, Silas had a lot of regrets. He talked about not having a lot of time to right a lot of wrongs that he made, you know? So, but obviously I like that thing at the end where like Vic ends up like resetting it and hearing his dad's voice, because even like the mother box trying to get to him by being like, hey, I can bring your, I can restore everything. I could give you back your parents. I can make you look like who you were, you know, so you're not alone. But for Vic, it's like, I'm not alone anymore. Like, obviously he has other people by his side. So like having that kind of like, you know, not having to struggle through that alone, knowing that he's not alone, that he has to go through this alone, that he has other people, different circumstances, but similar to his own of like being, you know, because obviously he initially looked at this as like, obviously his circumstances like, no, this isn't a gift. This is, you know, a curse. I'm a monster, you know? So, obviously that, you know, and I think everyone else could relate to that like complicated family situation. Obviously Bruce can, Barry can as well, and I think Arthur too, because like, you know, it's like obviously the complicated family situation he's coming from when it comes to his, like, you know, it's like for him it's like, yeah, like we're asking this kid to do this and he just lost his dad, and Barry was like, I thought you didn't care, and Arthur's like, I never said that. Like, yeah, like he had his reservations about certain things, because even he immediately called it out afterwards, like, that kid's dad is dead and that is on us for like putting him in this situation in the first place. Like, for us, you know, I'm wanting to use the mother box to bring Superman back, because it's a thing of like, we need him to go toe to toe with Steppenwolf, because none of the, even together, like, because at first, even though they're working together, they're still like working separately. They're not fully working together as a team. So we're not really still a match for him, but still we need, you know, we still need Clark to kind of make this right. And I thought it was interesting too, because I think this wasn't in the original either, was like everything with Arthur, like, because his backstory, I feel like we didn't learn about that more until Aquaman. Obviously the whole circumstances, because he's talking to Mara about like, oh yeah, like my mom who abandoned me, but it's like your mom made like the hardest choice she had to, leaving you with your dad. You know, you don't know how much that hurt. Your mom kind of took me in, so I know, and you know, so kind of have more respect to your mom. And I think that kind of, because I don't know if they really went into that in the theatrical version about like him kind of having beef with the Atlanteans, because even, you know, Diana's like, oh look, an Amazonian and Atlantean, like, yeah, we haven't kind of coexisted and worked together in like thousands of years. But for him it's like, yeah, I'm not the biggest, well, half Atlantean. He's like, and I'm also not on the best terms with them either. But there's also like that, I forgot the exact wording of it, but it was kind of like a phrase of basically, if you want to pull somebody from back from the dark, you're gonna have to give up someone. It's almost like an equivalent exchange of like, when you kind of bring someone back from the dark, someone else has to be kind of given it, you know, in exchange. And Diana was like, yeah, the Amazonians have that as well. And Arthur's like, how about that? I guess it's supposed to represent the fact that at one point in time these two groups were side by side, even though they're kind of, it's so interesting too, because especially the conversations, because I brought up Flashpoint and everything, it's like the whole thing about Atlanteans and the beef between Atlanteans and Amazonians, and being like, oh, because that's where Flashpoint ends up being, spoilers, just like, because Diana leads the war against the she leads the Amazonians in the war against the Atlanteans, being led by Arthur. So it's just interesting. Like, I don't know whether they're just setting it up, that wink nod like to that, or You know, it just, I think those lines set that up in particular. I think they're referencing, kind of winking and nodding, kind of like foreshadowing what potentially comes down the pipeline storyline wise. And I also thought it was kind of an interesting detail that like showcases that this still can coincide with Aquaman, because he fully doesn't completely control his powers until the Aquaman movie. So in this movie, you're not seeing him do all the water stuff because everyone else is doing it around it. Like Willem Dafoe's character as well as Mera are the ones doing the whole like using the water to like, you know, create like a pocket of air for them to talk and stuff. Like, you know, he doesn't do all that. He just, like everyone else does, because he doesn't unlock those abilities. So I think it's nice to kind of this still can keep in line with the continuity of, because I think Aquaman was still made with some of the ideas of what went down in Justice League, what Zack's initial plans were. I think these movies can still kind of coincide in those veins, even some of those movies. Shazam might still be kind of like, who knows, but I think at the very least with this, it kind of can. Shazam not as much, just because of a certain thing that kind of potentially takes it out of this continuity to a certain extent with the whole Superman situation, the cameo at the end. But regardless, my whole point was that all we see Arthur really do is just, you know, hold back the water. Like if he had more of his abilities, he would have probably been able to kind of completely stop it. But using the trident, he was able to hold it back. But obviously, he's only fighting with like a fraction of what he's fully capable of. Obviously, Aquaman, we get the full capabilities of what he can do and everything. So I think that was kind of, like I said, just a nice like continuity thing of like, right, he wouldn't have access to everything he can do right now. So I also thought it was interesting too how they handle everything with Bruce, because I think where Bruce is very jaded for being Batman for as long as he has, we still don't know all the ins and outs about what this particular Batman's been through. We get some winks and nods and potentially, like obviously like him and Deathstroke have history, which I'm wondering, would that have anything to do with I mean, obviously Robin in this continuity was killed by Joker potentially because of the ha-has and all that all over it, but obviously like him and Deathstroke have like beef, which obviously, like, depending on what Robin it was, whether it was Dick Grayson or not, because obviously the Teen Titans have crossed paths with Deathstroke in different continuity, so I don't know if there's any correlation there. Maybe there is something to it. You would assume it's Joker, because a lot of people were thinking maybe that was Jason Todd, considering the Joker angle to it. So once again, we don't really have any answers to, like, concrete answers to that, so because obviously a lot of that continuity for Batman in this continuity is still unclear about, you know, where things kind of stand on that front. But like obviously the Deathstroke thing, like they have history, so beyond that we don't know. But I just thought it was interesting, like obviously, like I said, he became very jaded. Obviously everything that went down with Clark, because for him, he even says it at the end, like he needed to make up for a mistake. And for him, because even Alfred is like, are you really doing this? Like, you don't really know that this is all going to like you kind of held up your end of the bargain. Like, you don't have to keep going. But for Bruce, it's like, I need to, you know, because for him, it's like, it's like for him, he's going all faith alone. And I think that's kind of an interesting progression for the character, because he was so jaded. Now this is a circumstance where it's like, I gotta believe, I have to have a little faith, because I think in this continuity, at least what I'm surmising is like, he's someone that kind of lost faith and kind of given up on a lot of stuff, like in his own rights. I think himself, as well as everything in the world around him, he had kind of given up and kind of seen the worst side of things rather than the best side of things, which is what Superman kind of represents, the best that humanity can be, and you know, a representation of humanity at its best, fighting for people, saving people, being that symbol of hope, you know. So, and speaking of that symbol, I thought it was interesting, like obviously for Martha, like, you know, saying those lines of like seeing the S everywhere, it's just kind of, it's like, you and me, Lois, we're the only ones who knew Clark. It's like all these people act like they knew him, but they only knew him as Superman. They didn't know him like we did, because Lois and Martha are in a very unique position where it's like, they're the only people out there in the world who knew him. Because even Bruce, like, yeah, knows Clark Kent and Superman, but he only got to know, you know, Superman, and kind of got to know Clark through that vein. So not to the same level that Lois and her mom and his mom got to know. I thought that was interesting, making it so that it was John that did that, where it was like, he's like, the world still needs you, Lois, because she had, after losing Clark, she kind of shut herself off from the world. But I think for him, it's like, what you can do for this world, like the world still needs you, Lois Lane. So he said what she needed to do. I mean, it makes sense, because I knew he probably automatically knew what she needed to hear, because maybe, you know, had they didn't go into it, but considering John Jones's situation being potentially the last Martian, depending, like I said, depending on how they handle the continuity of this, he knows what it's like to suffer great loss and having to keep going forward. So it's like, this world still needs you, Lois. So for him to kind of bring her back out, try to bring her back into the world by manifesting as transforming yourself into the one person who she needs to hear it from. Because I'd assume he's able to know what she needs to hear, because if you don't know, Martian Manhunter can also read minds. So I'm sure that's how he knew exactly what to say. Because it's so interesting too, because it's like, yeah, you didn't trip up in any little details. Like you probably tried not to stray too far away. You probably tried to be just everything that Martha would say and do, because you know that Martha would say that, but obviously Martha's dealing with a lot. The farm, she fell behind on the payments and stuff like that. Plus, I think for her, it's even more reason to move out, because it's like, hey, like, there's nothing. So it makes you wonder, had he come across Martha at some point in time, like, and kind of read her mind, or at the very least, he probably just for his own sake, probably, you know, looking after the people that were important to Clark, his mom and Lois, he was probably checking in on them. So for all we know, he could have done the same thing, pretending to be Lois and going to Martha. We didn't see, but it could have been something of that vein, of that nature, you know. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, like that actually introducing him as Martian Manhunter in that particular vein, and this I thought was kind of pretty dope. I even thought that was interesting too at the end, you know, jumping around a bit, that he did introduce himself as like, oh, they call me the Martian Manhunter. I'm surprised he didn't go like, oh, I'm John Jones, but some also call me the Martian Manhunter. I just thought it was interesting he just introduced himself as Martian Manhunter, not John Jones. But regardless, I just thought that was interesting. Also pretty, because I obviously, like, just because all the stuff that's come out about this movie beforehand, a lot of people, myself included, kind of knew about Harry Lennox's character being, you know, John Jones, that, oh, he's actually been the Martian Manhunter the entire time. And I think that's such an interesting thing about this continuity, because technically the first thing in this continuity is Superman, but it's still in that vein of, heroes have existed. Obviously, we've seen Wonder Woman's been here for decades doing her thing, so it still fits within the continuity. Like, obviously, there's heroes that have just been kind of, yeah, there's been some big scale things, but there's still things that are just probably labeled as myths and legend. Because even, yeah, Batman's been a thing for the past 20 years, yet people are still like, oh, you're real? I thought you were kind of made up, you know? It's still not like, because even Arthur was like, whoa, you dress up like a bat? And it's like, oh, that shithole of Gotham? Okay, you know, you are really kind of crazy. So there is elements of that, you know, it's still like, oh, so it kind of makes sense. But it also, that makes it even sadder, because like Clark was unaware that there was someone else on this planet much like him, like, who had lost their home as well. And I think that's kind of speaks to that, like why he wants to look after Martha and Lois once again, because, hey, I know what it's like to lose everything you've ever loved, to lose someone you love, because I guess it also depends on the continuity. I'm only pulling this from Supergirl, but obviously he had a wife and children that he ended up losing with what happened to Mars. So, but for him, he never thought people would ever come back together. Like, he's secretly been here on Earth for God knows how long. He's a shapeshifter. He could have been anyone, so we have no idea. But for it to be a situation of, you know, having seen the heroes come together to save the day, it inspired him to come out of the shadows. So, like, if you ever need me, I'm here. Once again, so you never know what other heroes are actually existing in this continuity. Like I said, Shazam, with kind of where things are set up in that continuity, that doesn't necessarily flow currently, but it still could later on down the pipeline of this continuity. It could make it so that, oh yeah, that could pan out at the end of the day regardless, you know. So I just think that's kind of interesting in its own right. But yeah, just like those superhero stories are just kind of like in their own little bubbles, kind of like a lot of comic book stuff. So it could easily be a thing of like, yeah, you can work around it, like, yeah, this is happening the entire time, you've just been aware of it, you've only seen it allocated to rumors and all that, you know. Once again, Clark and the Justice League fighting, once again, that scene, I didn't talk about, because I didn't talk about the original movie, but that's still one of my favorite scenes of like Barry running, and then in that moment Clark turning his head to look at me, even Barry being like, wait, what? Because Superman is super fast, that he can, like, you know, depending on the continuity, like him and Barry, like sometimes they'll race, and sometimes Barry will come out on top, sometimes Superman, like, it's still unclear. It kind of seems like more often than not it's kind of a thing of Barry lets Clark win on some occasions, because unless Barry would, like, if Barry really went out, he'd beat him. That's always kind of a debate amongst I think both fans as well as just the continuity within itself. So I just thought that was just kind of it's you know, once again showing that that was something that was originally planned, that was used in the original movie, that was kind of originally Zack's idea. So even in this, I'm still like, I'm glad that moment was there, just because I love that moment. Because it's such a cool moment of just showing you like how badass Clark is, but also just like the slow turn to look at Barry as Barry's running. And you know, I think that's sick. I even love the whole thing of him apologizing because like as Barry's running towards him, Clark just literally sidesteps him, and Barry runs into Arthur, and then Arthur's looking at him and he's just pointing to him. He's like, I am so sorry. Just like he's just kind of a nervous, right? Because he's kind of a kid on the battlefield himself to a certain extent. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But I did like, you know, obviously Lois being able to still kind of talk him down, and obviously the conversations about everything, because he's not remembering everything clearly, but obviously, you know, talking to Lois, seeing that she has the ring on and everything, and he was like, oh, so is that a yes? And, you know, holding her and his mom and being like, they brought me back for a reason, I have to find out why. And obviously that line of like, you know, the dialogue for both Jor-El as well as his own, you know, Jonathan, hearing that, like both of his fathers speaking to him as he kind of flies up, the black suit and everything. And visiting Alfred, and Alfred's like, oh, hey, he's like, hello, Alfred, like, you know, and it's like, well, I hope you're not too late. And as they're, you know, fighting and, you know, holding their own to a certain extent against, I mean, to be fair, I like the plan of attack all around. You know, Bruce was willing to even be like, no matter what you see, you know, you guys go ahead. But when the time came, they backed him up, because it's like, yeah, none of us are in this alone. We got each other's back. So even though Bruce was going to be like, if I have to sacrifice myself, so it's for the greater good, but they wouldn't let him. They fought by his side of like, no, we're in this together, and having each other's backs. So, and even though he might not be super powered, still kicking ass in his own right, taking down the parademons, using their cannons and stuff like that, you know. Doing the Batman thing is like, yeah, even under these extreme crazy circumstances, it's like, well, not getting rattled, doing your Batman thing and kicking some ass, as Batman is you know, continues to do often enough, you know. So once again, I don't remember if that worked out the same way in the theatrical version, but like Clark's entrance, like Steppenwolf trying to attack and the axe hitting Clark, and I forgot the line, but basically he was almost like, really? That's it? I was like, dude, come on. And it's such a one-sided fight. He's kicking his ass so hard, dude. It's like, oh, you poor bastard. I also feel like this fight was way more vicious than it was in, like, I mean, obviously I think the movie is R-rated, but still, I'm like, I felt like him like lasering him and then punching him in the face. I was like, dude, you're going hard. I almost halfway expected others to be like, whoa, Clark, calm down. But it's like, nah, screw him. We don't care. You know, if it was someone else, maybe, but considering it's Steppenwolf and he's trying to destroy the world, who cares? You know, the whole unity situation. But also like them working together like that, like Arthur kind of like stabbing him, holding him up, Clark doing a super punch, and then Diana getting a final blow by slicing off his head. I was like, oh, that's interesting, because in the theatrical, Steppenwolf is at least presumed to be alive, because like the parademons are attacking him, but he's teleported away, so he might have gotten messed up. Granted, we don't know, Darkseid could have killed him in that, but like the fact is they straight up killed him in this, and his head rolls over to the other side, and Darkseid just steps on it, and it's just like, there they are, the entire Justice League looking at the main baddie on the other side of the portal as the portal closed. I even love the side being like, I told you he was gonna fail. It's like, yeah, you did. But obviously we know where we're supposed to go now. We know it's Earth. That's where the anti-life equation is. We're going there. Because also it's this damn planet is one, he's like, I've conquered 100,000 planets I've kind of burned, and this is the one that fought me back. This is his greatest shame, because not only did he lose to this planet, the mother boxes are kind of short, which I love that moment too. Just like, obviously, Cyborg and Clark obviously like pulling the mother boxes apart. I also showed you how powerful that is, because obviously when Barry was running back, you saw even Clark, Man of Steel, still got eradicated by that thing, like, you know, the unity or whatnot. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, but obviously showcasing like, oh yeah, Darkseid is going, like, this planet isn't safe. Darkseid will, like, now that he knows the anti-life, because that's even what John Jones was saying at the end of like, yeah, we have to find it before Darkseid does. But I did like, obviously, everyone going their separate ways, but obviously, you know, kind of embracing who they are now and what this means going forward. Obviously, Barry showing like, you know, it's like, yeah, I got this job. He's like, it's not basically along the lines of like, it's not the greatest job, but it's still like a great job. And his dad's like so proud of him. It's like, yeah, like obviously you got none of that from me, but it's like, oh, look at you, Barry, you know. And, you know, Cyborg, you know, hearing the message from his dad, kind of, you know, embracing who he is now and what he can do, like what he can bring, you know, to Earth. And obviously, you know, everything with Clark's story obviously being back and everything. So I thought that was, you know, pretty dope. Like obviously similarities to the theatrical version, but obviously the thing at the end, returning to what is like we got a look at in Batman v Superman. I think I'd heard this from someone, it's called the Nightmare World, I think is what that's called. It's a very essentially like an injustice situation where it's like, because once again, what Barry told me, he's like, Barry told me that Lois was the key, and it's like, well, yeah, she was able to talk to Clark and get him to come back, yeah, but like, he felt like there was something darker at play there, and now we kind of get context to that. Obviously, something happened to, because it's interesting, like, with the way, like, it seems like what we saw in that regard still plays out. That could have been like a future vision still of like Darkseid coming to the planet, because like obviously Clark is holding a pair of bones. I'm assuming that was Lois's, and then Darkseid touches his shoulders and it's like, you're gonna be my, I guess not liaison, but my, you know, it's like, you'll be the one that will guide me. I guess it's almost he welcomed like Clark amongst his ranks of like, you're gonna be my go-to dude for the planet Earth, like rule this planet with an iron fist. So it's not like just Clark on his own with nuts, not just like because the injustice situation makes him like he's basically ruling the world almost like a dictator like fist. But it's not just him. It seems like he's kind of Darkseid's boy in that, like, in that sense of like, oh, you're one of my generals or one of my people to kind of do your thing. Because obviously it's interesting with that continuity. Well, in many different regards, because I had skipped over it, but obviously Lex breaking out, telling Deathstroke, hey, Bruce Wayne is Batman. So it's like, okay, and once again, we don't know 100% what their history is in this continuity. But it's interesting that despite we get that and then hard cut to the Nightmare World where they're working together. Once again, kind of like the very Injustice thing where some heroes become villains and villains become heroes type of thing. And then obviously the talk with Joker for him. And he says an interesting line of basically like, oh, you sent a boy wonder to do a man's job. So I guess it's like, because obviously they hint to it earlier in the movie that Lois is pregnant. So I guess at one point, Bruce like either kind of adopted Superboy, which I think is interesting because obviously, you know, depending on the continuity and stuff like that, him taking, in some regards you'd be like, he's not necessarily the best father considering how Damian turned out and stuff like that. So that's kind of a whole thing in itself. I don't think he exists in this continuity, but still, you know, so it's like, yeah, that led to some complications. So you taking in Superman and Lois's kid, that probably has its own complications as well. So I don't know whether that's hinting to like, hey, like he went up against his old man and ended up dying is what I kind of took that as. But I thought was really interesting when Bruce kind of throws it back at him by being like, oh, because of, you know, Mira, what started all was Mira being like, oh, you have no idea what loss you have no idea how I feel, because obviously Arthur's dead in this continuity. Once again, we saw visions of that because like Arthur being, but instead of it being like Darkseid that did it in this continuity, they're saying it was Superman. So like that thing of Darkseid kind of running things, it's its own thing. I think in this particular, it is kind of an injustice thing of he's ruling with an iron fist. It might not necessarily, I mean, either he is still being controlled by Darkseid, but a lot of stuff we saw Darkseid do, it might just be Clark who did it in this continuity. You know, he might be the one, he might be the top dog now. He might have like removed, he might be the one sitting on a throne now in this particular continuity rather than it being Darkseid. So he might not be working for Darkseid. He might be like, nope, Darkseid's dead and I'm running this ship now. I'm running this whole operation. Maybe, maybe not. Like I said, just speculation on my part. But I thought it was interesting, like I said, the line from Bruce being like, well, because Joker had said like, oh, obviously it's like the death of a mother, a father, kind of knowing all there is to know about Bruce and what he's lost, so he understands more so than anybody. But Bruce saying the line of, you know, when Harley died in my arms, I made a promise to her that I would kill you, and I'm going to fucking kill you, and slowly too. And I love that it did seem like it rattled him a little bit. He was almost like, ha, you almost got me there. but it was like interesting because, you know, I think Birds of Prey still falls within this continuity, potentially. So they are broken up, but it's potentially hinting that maybe they got back together in continuity wise. Obviously, maybe it's just kind of hinting like, this continuity is a little different. That kind of went a little differently than the current continuity. So who knows? You can look at it multiple ways, but I thought that was interesting because in the Injustice storyline, Harley is on Batman's side of things. She is kind of on what is considered the good side of things because Superman's side isn't the good side because it's more so like a lot of stuff went wrong, which is interesting because Barry's actually on Superman. I think he was on the other side in the first Injustice. I'm not as well versed in it because I know a little bit of some of the game storyline, but not all of it. I think it was a game first, then a comic book. It might have been a comic book first and then a game. I think it's game first, then comic book. Do correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm most likely am wrong. I mean, it's a lot of interesting things to kind of keep in mind. Like, obviously, it's like that is a potential outcome, and it seems like, well, there's still the warning that Bruce got of like, right, like, Lois is the key. Like, her death is what set everything in motion. Like, whatever that death may be, whether it was by Darkseid's hand, someone else's hands, because, like I said, I think in Injustice, it was Joker that kills Lois, and that's what set everything off, because I think what started was like basically him getting revenge by killing Joker, but it might have been Darkseid, and in that moment, like, once again, the different versions of like what we had seen with Darkseid kind of reigning supreme and Clark basically being there with like Bruce's head in his hands, you know, those seem to be two separate things that could still coincide. Once again, just depends on how they potentially handle things going forward. Obviously, there's a conversation for a lot of people of continuing Zack's, you know, continuity, because a lot of the movies still tie into it. Aquaman, Wonder Woman, they still kind of fit in this regards, especially in Wonder Woman's case, because it's like, well, you know, Wonder Woman kind of adds even further back history to this. Obviously, it did in this continuity, in this movie, but also within the confines of its movies as well. Going back from World War I to, because I always have to clarify that, because I always confuse it with Captain America 2, which, I mean, Captain America, which takes place in like World War II. Like, I always kind of conflate that and make it so like in my head I think like Wonder Woman took place in World War II as well. Like, I like I said, I get that confused in my head sometimes. But obviously, Wonder Woman taking place in World War I, and obviously the second Wonder Woman taking place in 1984. So obviously, once again, begging the question, what place is the third one going to take place in? Obviously, if it was present day, what continuity are they going by? The theatrical one or this one? A lot of people lean towards keep with this, because a lot of the stuff still fits in the veins of this one, continuity as well. But also the conversation is this just going to be a HBO Max thing of like continuing Zack's thing of whether it's a Justice League 2 and 3, or whether you still spawn off future projects from this? Obviously, you have your Elseworld stuff like Joker, the Batman, stuff like that. Potentially what Flashpoint can necessarily mean for this continuity as well, kind of change some stuff if you want to kind of head in different directions, you know. It's interesting. I am someone who talked about it. I like Man of Steel, I like Batman v Superman. I even like the theatrical version of Justice League. I know a lot of people had their issues with it, but I still enjoyed it. Yeah, and I really liked a lot of stuff, but obviously I like, because obviously to me this movie is obviously built on a lot of stuff that was cut from the original, and just being like, oh, we didn't use this stuff because these are like, there are things that were still used in the theatrical one. Now you get a lot more context and story behind obviously a lot of the characters, and also like a lot of their motivations, like in particular Cyborg and Barry, you know, like understanding Victor and Barry, Cyborg and Flash, of understanding who they are as characters and their motivations for what led them to becoming where they are right now, and their stories kind of potentially going forward and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'd like to see the continuity continue in either way, whether it is like continuing with a future Justice League 2 and 3 with Zack behind it, or whether it's just continuing existing in this continuity going forward with other future movies, you know, your Lanterns type of movies, because obviously you're also getting your TV shows now, whether they tie into this continuity or whether they just lay out there as a multiverse thing, that's fine too. So, because like your Constantine show, I only recently learned this, apparently they are making a Zatanna show, so that's pretty dope. Stuff like that. So obviously these are just my thoughts about everything. I do apologize. I know it's like a little all over the place, but I try to be at least a little more concise in some of like my discussion points. But yeah, like I said, this was just meant to be just a discussion anyway. So Obviously, let me know your thoughts about some of the stuff in the movie. What are some of your favorite stuff? What are some of your thoughts potentially about where things could go forward? You know, whether it's just the nightmare / injustice continuity they potentially set up at the ending, or just where things are present day. Like, just let me know all your thoughts. Obviously, would you want to see this continuity continued? I know some people enjoy it, some other people don't, and that's totally fine. Like I said, would you want a Justice League 2 and 3 in this, or would you just want it to be a thing of, hey, let this continuity be like the main through line continuity, and you just build off stories off of this continuity? Just let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.